Look, fellas, there's a quiet moment a lot of men over 40 have, usually late at night, when the house is quiet and the phone's in your hand. You're scrolling, you see an ad, a headline, a comment, and suddenly this thought hits you. Is this just how it is now? Not broken enough to go to a doctor. Not confident enough to ignore it. You tell yourself it's stress, age, bad sleep. You promise you'll deal with it later. But here's the uncomfortable truth most men never say out loud. The longer you ignore what's actually happening in your body, the harder it becomes to reverse. And a lot of guys accidentally make it worse trying to fix it the wrong way. I'm Dr. Rosalia Viterbo. I work with men over 40 every single week who feel like something about their bodies has quietly shifted. Energy isn't what it used to be. Confidence feels thinner, and sexual performance doesn't feel automatic anymore. And I want you to hear this clearly. These are not weak men. These are business owners, dads, leaders, guys who've handled pressure their whole lives. What frustrates them isn't just the change. It's not understanding why it's happening or who to trust for real answers. I chose men's health because too many guys are either dismissed, over-medicated, or sold quick fixes that ignore how the male body actually changes after 40. My job is to cut through the noise, explain what's really going on inside your body, and show you what works long-term without extremes, embarrassment, or false promises. Here's what we're going to unpack together. I'm going to show you why most conversations around size, performance, and confidence completely miss the real issue, especially for men over 40. We'll talk about the subtle physical changes that quietly affect blood flow, tissue quality, and response over time, and why chasing quick enlargement tricks almost always backfires. I'll walk you through the most common mistakes I see men make when they try to fix this on their own, and what actually starts moving the needle in a healthy, sustainable way. And stay with me until the end, because there's one factor tied to perceived length and function that almost no one explains, yet it's often the difference between frustration and real confidence returning. Nothing about your body suddenly fails at 40 or 45. It's not like a switch flips and things stop working. It's slower than that, quieter, more gradual. And that's exactly why so many men miss what's actually happening. Think of your body less like an on and off button and more like a dimmer switch. Every year, hormones shift a little. Blood vessels lose a bit of flexibility. Recovery slows down. Inflammation creeps in. None of it feels dramatic on its own, but stacked together over time, it changes how things function, especially in an area that depends heavily on circulation, nerve signaling, and tissue health. Here's where the misunderstanding starts. Most guys assume penile length is purely genetic and fixed. End of story. So when things don't look or feel the same anymore, they panic. They assume they've lost size or that something is permanently shrinking. That fear sends them straight into internet rabbit holes, miracle products, and extreme ideas that promise fast results. But what's really happening most of the time has very little to do with actual tissue loss. As men age, blood flow efficiency declines, testosterone and nitric oxide signaling drop, pelvic tissues tighten, fat distribution changes, posture changes, even stress hormones play a role. All of that can affect how fully the tissue expands, how it sits on the body, and how responsive it feels. To a man, that feels like loss. But biologically, it's more accurate to call it reduced expression of what's already there. And no one explains this clearly. On top of that, men are conditioned to stay quiet about this stuff. You don't compare notes, you don't ask questions, you definitely don't bring it up at dinner. So instead of getting grounded information, guys internalize it. They feel embarrassed. They feel like they're the only ones dealing with it. And that emotional pressure makes everything worse, because stress alone can restrict blood flow and blunt sexual response. Another piece most men don't realize is how lifestyle shifts after 40 stack the deck against them. More sitting, less movement, poor sleep, more alcohol than the body can handle like it used to, chronic low-grade stress. All of those directly affect circulation and hormonal balance. Again, nothing dramatic, just enough to quietly chip away year after year. So when a man looks in the mirror and thinks something's off, He's not imagining it. But the conclusion he jumps to is usually wrong. The problem isn't that his body is broken, it's that no one ever taught him how male physiology actually evolves with age, or how much of this is modifiable when you approach it the right way. First thing you need to understand is blood flow. Everything starts here. Penile tissue is basically a specialized vascular structure. It doesn't grow the way muscle does. It expands when blood flow is strong, elastic, and responsive. After 40, blood vessels naturally lose some flexibility. Add stress, poor sleep, inflammation, and sitting too much, and you get weaker expansion. Most men think this means they've lost length. What's really happening is they're no longer reaching full expansion consistently. That's a huge difference. The fix isn't pills or pumps. It's restoring vascular health, so the tissue can actually fill the way it's designed to. Second, hormones quietly change the equation. Testosterone doesn't just affect libido, it supports nitric oxide production, tissue integrity, and nerve sensitivity. As levels decline, erections may feel softer, slower, or less complete. Men often chase size when the real limiter is hormonal signaling. I see guys obsess over measurements when the real issue is their body isn't getting the message to fully respond. When hormones are optimized naturally, perceived size often improves without touching a single enlargement product. Third, pelvic floor tension plays a bigger role than most men realize. A tight, overworked pelvic floor restricts blood inflow and traps blood outflow. That combination limits firmness and visible length. Men assume tightening equals strength. In reality, balance matters more. Chronic stress, long hours sitting, and bracing the core all day create tension patterns that directly affect function. When we address mobility, breathing, and proper pelvic control, many men notice immediate changes in fullness and hang, not because anything grew, but because nothing is being restricted anymore. Fourth, body composition changes distort perception. As men gain abdominal fat, especially visceral fat, the penis appears shorter because more of it is buried. This is not shrinkage, it's displacement. Lose inches at the waist, and length returns visually. This is one of the most common reasons men panic unnecessarily. They think something is wrong with their anatomy, when the issue is metabolic health. Fix insulin resistance, reduce inflammation, and suddenly things look very different without touching the penis itself. Fifth, nerve signaling and sensitivity decline with age and lifestyle. Alcohol, poor glucose control, and chronic inflammation dull nerve response. When sensation drops, erections don't feel as firm or as full, which feeds the belief that size has changed. Improving nerve health through sleep quality, nutrition, and circulation often restores firmness and confidence. Again, this is about function first, not extreme interventions. Sixth, posture and movement matter more than you'd expect. Rounded shoulders, anterior pelvic tilt, and tight hips change how the pelvis positions the penis relative to the body. Men don't connect posture to sexual health, but they should. Improved alignment improves blood flow, nerve pathways, and visible presentation. This is low-hanging fruit most men ignore. And finally, mindset and stress hormones can sabotage everything. Chronic cortisol constricts blood vessels and suppresses testosterone. Performance anxiety creates a self-reinforcing loop that blunts response. Men start monitoring instead of experiencing. That alone can reduce firmness and perceived size. When stress is managed and confidence rebuilt through understanding, function improves naturally. Here's the key takeaway from all of this. Most men are not trying to gain something they never had. They're trying to restore what their body is fully capable of when circulation, hormones, nerves, and mechanics are working together. That's a very different problem and a much more solvable one. Mark was 52, married, busy career, worked out just enough to feel like he was doing something, but spent most of his day sitting. Sleep was inconsistent, stress was high, alcohol was his nightly way to shut his brain off. On paper, nothing looked alarming, but he came in frustrated. He told me, "Doc, I feel like I've lost size. Things don't look or feel the same, and it's messing with my confidence." He wasn't chasing porn-level expectations. He just wanted to feel like himself again. When we dug deeper, there was no true anatomical loss, no disease, no damage. What we found instead was predictable: borderline low testosterone, poor vascular markers, elevated stress hormones, and significant pelvic tension. His waistline had crept up, and his posture had slowly collapsed forward over the years. I didn't give him a miracle pill. I didn't tell him to buy devices. What we did was clean up the foundations. We improved sleep consistency, reduced alcohol, focused on circulation and metabolic health, addressed pelvic floor balance and breathing, brought stress under control so his nervous system could actually shift out of fight or flight. Within a few months, his erections were fuller and more consistent. His confidence came back. And here's the part that matters. He told me things looked bigger again, not because we added tissue, but because his body was finally expressing what it already had. The lesson here is important. Mark didn't need enlargement. He needed restoration. And that distinction saves men years of frustration, money, and unnecessary anxiety. When you address the root causes instead of chasing symptoms, the body responds often better than men expect. First myth: penis size permanently shrinks with age. That's why this belief spreads so fast. Men notice changes after 40 and assume loss is inevitable. The truth is, true tissue loss is rare unless there's injury or disease. What most men experience is reduced blood filling, hormonal signaling, and mechanical restriction. Believing shrinkage is unavoidable pushes men toward panic fixes instead of restoring function. Second myth: devices, pills, or extreme methods are the fastest solution. Men want control, and these products promise it. The problem is they ignore physiology. Aggressive stretching, vacuum abuse, or unregulated supplements can damage blood vessels and nerves. That doesn't improve length. It compromises long-term performance. Short-term gains, if any, often come at a real cost. Third myth: if performance drops, testosterone alone will fix everything. Testosterone matters, but it's not magic. Without addressing circulation, metabolic health, stress hormones, and pelvic mechanics, hormone optimization only gets you part of the way. Men who rely on one lever instead of the whole system stay frustrated. Here's the truth most men never hear. Penile length expression is a reflection of overall male health. Blood flow, hormones, nerves, posture, and stress all work together. Ignore one, and the system underperforms. Address them together, and the body responds in a way that feels natural, safe, and sustainable. Once you understand that, the conversation shifts from "how do I make it bigger" to "how do I make my body work the way it's supposed to again?" That's a far better question, and it leads to far better outcomes. Most men over 40 aren't dealing with true loss of penile length. What they're experiencing is reduced expression, less blood flow, weaker hormonal signaling, tighter pelvic tissues, changes in body composition, and higher stress levels, all stacking up over time. That combination changes how things look, feel, and respond. Chasing quick fixes or extreme solutions usually misses the real issue and often makes things worse. When you focus instead on circulation, hormones, nerve health, posture, stress, and overall metabolic health, the body can restore function far more than most men expect. The big shift is this: you're not broken, and this isn't inevitable. This is about understanding how your body changes after 40 and working with it intelligently, not fighting it out of fear or frustration. If you're a man over 40 and any part of this hit close to home, don't just scroll past it and hope it fixes itself. That's what keeps guys stuck for years. Take a second right now and hit the like button. It tells the algorithm to show this to more men who actually need straight answers. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future conversations on hormones, energy, and sexual health that actually make sense. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me this: what's the one change you've noticed in your body after 40 that nobody warned you about? I read those, and they help shape what I cover next. I've also put a free men's health guide in the description below. No gimmicks, Just practical steps to help your body work better again. Grab it while it's there and start taking control instead of guessing. I want you to remember this. Your body isn't betraying you, and you didn't miss some secret window. What you're noticing has a reason, and more importantly, it has solutions when you approach it the right way. Stay curious, stay patient with your body, and don't settle for confusion or fear as answers. I'm Dr. Rosalia Viterbo. Stay strong, stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.